All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's SCORE webinar. I'm Steve Mahoney. I'm joined by Kathleen Thompson and Ruth Teray. We are all mentors at the Hartford or Connecticut chapters of SCORE. Today, Ruth is going to be presenting all about franchising. So, Ruth, if you want to go ahead and share your intro and background and take it away.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to talk about one of my favorite subjects, franchising. So, to give you a little bit of my background and how I actually became a franchise consultant, I was in IT for two large insurance companies up in Hartford. I spent most of um, my life up in Hartford County. And I was, I guess, the victim, if you would say, of a downsizing after 25 years. And I was at the Outplacement Center and I actually did a webinar on franchising. And I worked with a franchise coach and I bought a Budget Blinds franchise. And I had that business for 5 years and grew it to revenues of over $1.2 million the last 3 years. So I made it very sellable. And in year five, I sold my business and then went to work for the franchisor for Budget Blinds Corporate. So I was a business coach. I did new franchisee training and then was the director of operations. And then when I left there, I joined the U Network. And primarily it was because I could take my experiences as both a franchisee and seeing the other side of it, working for a franchisor, and help people find business ownership through franchising. So let's get started. Here is our agenda for the day. So just to sort of level set what franchising is, we'll start with that. And things to think about regarding a franchise versus starting your own business from scratch. What you can earn as a franchise, that I get that right out there at the beginning because that's the most important question to everybody. What are some advantages of franchising? We'll talk about the fees and ownership models. And then at that point, we'll pause. So if you have any questions, we'll go ahead and just open it up to questions. And then we'll talk more about the steps to franchising. What are some characteristics of successful franchises? And then perhaps your business is something that could be franchised. It might be an opportunity for you to expand. And then we'll end again with a Q&A session. So definition of franchising. So how most people begin their franchise journey, if they want to franchise their business, is they have a great idea, they start a business, and they're successful, they're profitable. So they decide, well, I think I'm going to open another store a couple miles away. And so they open another one, and then they open a third, and maybe a fourth and a fifth. But they found that it's very easy for them to be successful and profitable in multiple locations. They understand how to get these businesses up and running. So the best way for them to expand more nationally is to consider franchising. And that's the typical path that you'll hear most franchise businesses follow. So the franchisor, so that is the person that created that model, the franchisor grants you, the franchisee, the right to operate under its brand name and use its business model. So other terms you may hear in franchising are parent company. So sometimes a franchise parent company will have multiple brands under its umbrella. And then you may also hear the term FSO, franchise sales organization. And typically a new franchise will partner with an FSO to help them grow, to help them sell more franchises. So I thought this was an interesting statistic to just include as we start, that new franchisees only fail about 10% of the time, whereas independent business owners, that number could be as high as 60%. And that came from obviously the internet and Time for You. So why would you franchise versus starting a business from scratch? And what are some of the pros and cons? Well, franchising inherently has less risk because someone has already perfected the business model and they've proved that it's profitable. You also receive that built-in support. You get training in the beginning. You get a business coach for the life of your ownership of that business. There's usually brand recognition. So if you're buying a brand that is well known, then people will initially trust and respect that brand. The downside is that there is limited flexibility. So think about a McDonald's, for example. So you want the experience that customers have at a McDonald's in Connecticut to be exactly the same if they were in California. So there are strict guidelines, especially in the food franchise industry, so that everyone can expect the same quality and the same experience. So there's less, I'll say, creative freedom in most franchises. So then looking at starting a business from scratch, you've got complete control. So you can develop this business and take it in whatever direction you feel is the best for the product or service that you're presenting. So there's greater risk because you're figuring everything out for the first time. So everything from how are you going to market your products and services, either getting people to, let's say, buy them online, or if you want to get people in the door. There's also the supply chain aspect of it. Who are the best vendors to provide you with those products? So as you go along the journey, starting a business from scratch, all of those things you need to figure out and document. But the real benefit is that it is your unique identity. So, I think of it as, it's your baby, and that baby will grow and it'll change. And so it's very much a personal reflection of you. So in franchising, we have a statement that we use quite often, which is at the bottom of the slide, and it's around being in business for yourself, but not by yourself. So here it is, the $1 million question: what can you earn as a franchise? And I get this question all the time from my clients. And the answer is, it depends. And as you look at the slide, you can see why I can't give, a really steadfast number or, a percentage for net income. But let's just talk a little bit about what those factors are that go into what you can earn as a franchise. So it will really depend on the industry and your location and what that brand is. If it's a brand that's well known, it's going to be easier for people to understand what products and services you're offering. So if you're in, say, the food or like a beverage type of franchise, those are businesses, it's volume driven. You need to get people in the door. And typically the average ticket is lower, although I will say if you've been to McDonald's recently, like the price of a Happy Meal is outrageous these days. So I'm not sure it's necessarily, I would call it a low ticket, but it's very much volume driven. And so because of that, your overall net margin might be lower, but if you have the volume, that's how you can be successful and profitable. Now, if you compare that to service-based franchises, they may have much lower operating costs. A lot of service-based franchises can operate out of their home or a small office, and so they don't have a lot of the overhead that something like a restaurant would have. So what type of demand is there for your business? If it's fitness, there's always a gym, at least one gym in just about every town. And there may be, higher revenue possibilities in those types of industries, but there's also more competition. And that just needs to be another factor that you look at as you try to figure out, what am I going to be able to put in my pocket at the end of the year? So if you are in a brand, as I said, that you can run it from home, and that was my business, my budget blinds for the first 2.5 years. I ran it from my house. My garage was my warehouse. I had a little office set up. So I didn't have any of that overhead that other brick and mortar type businesses would have. And what that enabled me to do is to become cash flow positive very quickly and break even quickly. So a location is one of the biggest wild cards in terms of what your expenses are going to be on a monthly and an annual basis. So if you have the type of business that should be next to Whole Foods in West Hartford, because the type of clients that would want to use your services, shop at Whole Foods, that's going to be a much higher monthly rent or lease than some other businesses that don't need to be in that prime real estate. So it's really important as you're looking at a franchise business or any business to understand, where do I need to be located to get the right type of foot traffic, to get to people that are shopping and people that are, like-minded in terms of the services I offer and other businesses nearby me offer. So if it's a reputable brand, like Budget Blinds, we had been in business for over 40 years. We had 1,000 franchisees, 1,500 territories. So it wasn't as if every single person understood what Budget Blinds did, like a McDonald's or a Subway. But there was a sense of it being a national brand. It had been around for a while. So there was some inherent trust and credibility that came with that. And then lastly is the royalty and marketing fees. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides, but that is something that you have to factor into your pro forma or your business plan to understand at the end of each month, what are you paying to the franchisor and what's left as profit for you. So a little bit about the advantages of franchising. So we did talk about that brand recognition and trust. So that is a big benefit for businesses that have those well-known brands. The operational support, so the initial training. When I opened my business, I went to California for 2 weeks to do my Budget Blinds training, and it covered everything from measuring to sales to financial management and installation. But then I also had a business coach as I was developing my business, ramping everything up. So for the life of my business, I had somebody that I could call. So franchisors spend a lot of resources and money and time devising marketing strategies. And it's usually broken into two buckets. You have your national ad fund or your national brand fund. And that's really meant to develop brand awareness across whatever regions. If it's a national brand, then it would try to heighten the awareness of that brand across the entire country. Or if it's just regionalized, it would focus its energies there. But it's really just to build that awareness, that top of mind awareness. And then they will give you a local marketing plan. So what do you need to do locally in terms of Google My Business and Facebook and Instagram, and what networking groups and chambers should you join? So it spells it out for you. Think of it as a recipe. You need to do all of these things. Here's how often to be successful. So established systems and processes. So the franchisor has figured that out for you. And I know from my time being a Budget Blinds business coach, the people that followed the process and what we called it follow the model and executed as it was prescribed that they should were the ones that saw the greatest success. And they also kept a really sharp eye on their overall operating expenses. What were they spending money on, and where could they cut back? So those were the people that were truly the most successful. And oftentimes we would get people that purchased a Budget Blinds franchise, and we were going through training, and they would say, well, I think I know how to do this better. I think that I have some other ideas and other ways that I'd like to run my business. And what would happen is, they would have fits and starts, and they'd stumble, and eventually they would come back and say, okay, maybe I don't have the best way to run this business. So help me understand more about the model. And then they followed the model and were successful. So when you buy a franchise, you are buying that proven business model. And then lastly, just networking. One of my favorite things as a Budget Blinds franchise was our national annual convention. And it was just a great time to see the people I went to training with and see all of my other friends near and far, and share stories, ask for advice. But it really made you feel like you were part of a bigger whole. And then financing assistance. So some franchises will actually finance part or all of your franchise fee. So it just gives you another option when you're looking at how to fund your business. So now let's talk a little bit more about the fees. So the initial franchise fee, and don't ask me why it's this number, but the majority of franchisors set their franchise fee for a single unit or territory at $49,500. And when you buy a second and a third, you actually get a discounted rate, but that's typically what the franchise fee is. And what you get for that is that proven model, the business model, the marketing strategy, the ongoing and initial support. So all of that is what you're paying for. Now, people often ask me, well, how much does a franchise cost? And it can be well under $100,000, or it could be well over $1 million. And it depends on many factors, but a rule of thumb is if it's a home-based business, something that you're running from your home, then it's usually a lower cost because you don't have those additional expenses. And if it's something that is requiring a specialized build out or specialized equipment. So think about a laundromat. So there are a few laundromat franchises. those investments can be well over $1 million. So royalties and marketing fees, and then there are oftentimes some additional fees for technology, and they're typically structured on a percentage of your gross sales. So the royalties will be anywhere from 4 to 8% of your gross sales, and they're usually collected monthly. And then the marketing is anywhere from 1 to 3%. And again, it's on your gross sales. Something like a technology fee or call center fee is usually a flat fee. It's a consistent number month over month. So when we think about the fees and the royalties that we're paying ongoing to a franchisor, the way I look at it and think about it is if you, at the beginning of your business, do your business plan, your pro forma, and you have a target for your gross revenue, and then you have a target for your net income. And if you are meeting those targets and those goals that you set for yourself, if you're growing, then I look at all of the fees you're paying as simply a cost of doing business. And it's actually proving to be successful because you're seeing your goals realized. So as much as it may be painful to give the franchisor those fees on a monthly boundary, if you are walking away with what you set your goal to be, then it's well worth it because they're doing their job investing in great marketing strategies, new products, new services. And then lastly, as we talked about earlier, just thinking about the real estate component. So if you're near a Whole Foods as an example, or in a high-end shopping plaza, your lease is going to be much higher than if you can operate your business out of a space in an industrial complex, as an example. So now we're going to talk more about the different types of ownership models that you can have when you purchase a franchise. So the simplest and most common really is to buy a single unit and be an owner operator. So that's what I did. I bought one territory. It contained West Hartford, Avon, Farmington, Wethersfield, Newington. And I was in my business day in and day out. That replaced my full-time job. And it's really ideal for people like me. My whole life had been spent in corporate. I didn't know anything really about running my own business. So it was a way for me to start in business ownership, but having it be somewhat contained. And so I could focus on my one territory. My investment was much lower because I wasn't buying those additional territories and I wasn't hiring extra people. And it was something that I really wanted to be a part of. I love fabric. I love the whole design process. So for me, that was the real benefit. That was why I bought the business, is because I loved doing that kind of work. And I love people. So for me to be out doing sales with my customers was what I chose my role to be in the business. So sometimes you have to think about, what are the challenges or restrictions, and it could be that your growth is limited. Although I will say, my experience was different in that as people bought territories around me and I lost the ability to have that bigger pool of possible customers, I actually shifted my focus for my business to do more large scale commercial. So I became registered with the state of Connecticut, and the city of Hartford as a woman-owned business, and was able to do a number of large commercial jobs based on that. So now we have multi-unit. So that's exactly what it sounds like. So instead of buying one, you buy many. So you've got a higher income potential. You've got better brand visibility because people will be seeing your locations or your vans or your trucks throughout a larger area. And you can get some economies of scale. So you're able to leverage some of your resources. Now the investment is higher just because you're buying more. And you've got to think about the complexities of managing multiple locations and try to be aware of overextending yourself. So master agreement, master franchise is when the franchisor grants you the right to develop and manage franchisees within a specific area. So let's say you purchased the state of Connecticut and you would sub-franchise to folks so that people could open up whatever it was your business was in all parts of the state of Connecticut based on how you actually configure your territories. So it's a great opportunity for people that are business folks. They're experienced entrepreneurs and investors. You get revenue not only from any locations that you open up yourself, but you also get revenue from those that open up franchises in your area. People will do this because they want to have control of a geographic area and make sure that the brand is presented consistently anywhere in that area. So upfront costs are higher, but you do have that benefit of some residual income. It's more complex to manage because you've got more moving parts. And it's important that all of your sub-franchises actually adhere to those brand standards. So very much like a master franchise is the area developer. The difference is that they don't have the rights to sub-franchise. So they commit to the franchisor that they will open a number of units within a set period of time. So they get what we call a development schedule. And again, this is ideal for people that are looking at this as an investment. They want to have multiple units within an area. And so it really allows them to lock down those markets in which they want to operate their business, but it gives them the ability to control their growth. So usually they have about 18 months between opening their first and their second location. And the things to consider is just that you have to meet that development schedule. So it is a commitment that you make to the franchisor, and not opening it could cause you to not necessarily lose your franchise, but maybe lose the rights to develop it. And this last one is the one that I'd say 75% of my clients ask for, and it's called semi-absentee. You also hear it called executive model or manage the manager. And so basically people want to keep their full-time job, their full-time corporate job, or perhaps they own a business and they want to open another business. I've got people that are also interested in that. And the franchise is going to be run by a general manager. So the owner who is the franchisee, spends maybe anywhere from 5 to 10 hours a week once the business is up and running, handling things like the finances, the marketing strategy, and then meeting with their general manager. So it really gives people that flexibility to have their income and have the benefits from their full-time job, but they are building equity in this business that's on the side. So the real key and the main consideration is having that reliable, trustworthy manager that is going to stay with you as you're growing and building this business. Most of the time in these models, the franchisor will ask that your general manager attend that initial training as well as you. But it also allows you some diversification. You've got another income stream outside of, let's say, the stock market, and you can scale this a little more easily because you are not the person, that has to be in that business full time. So once you get one up and running, it's easy to open another one, hire another manager, and just follow that same process. So it is a higher investment because you are needing to get that manager in place right from the get-go. And so that is going to tap into what your net income, your net profit is, but you are also keeping that full-time job. So let's pause here and just see if we have any questions.
We don't have any questions in the Q&A box right yet. Just a
Okay.
reminder, if you do have questions, please type them. I did, though, based on the last section that you were covered, I wondered if you could tell us how would someone find out which of those ownership models are available for a specific franchise?
So that is what I work through with my clients. So some franchisors allow you to run the business in that semi-absentee model, but others will not. They want it to be an owner operator. Like what I owned, Budget Blinds, you needed to be an owner operator. And as far as the master franchise or the area developer, not every franchisor has those types of agreements in place. So that's when you work with someone like myself or a franchisor, they'll let you know what's available.
Okay, and do you have any examples of businesses that tend to use one ownership style versus another?
So the home services space, although there are some exceptions of that to this rule, usually those are owner operator models. So if you think about what I was doing in Budget Blinds, or say kitchens, baths, closets, garages, those types of businesses, those are more often owner operator models. When we think about things that you can do from a semi-absentee perspective, some of the food brands will allow you to do that. Like physical therapy, there's a brand you can run that semi-absentee. If you did pest control, so thinking about mosquitoes and those types of things, that's often run semi-absentee. So, and as we'll talk about now, that's part of what happens as we start this process, is really trying to figure out, which ownership model is best for you. And then, what are your interests? What are the things that you might want to own?
Great. Chris asked a question. What are some good incentives for a general manager to keep them engaged and wanting to grow the business?
So if you can give them equity in the business, that's a great way to incentivize them. And it also is a great way to retain them. So maybe there is partial ownership that you give them in the business. And as your financial goals are met, then they're bonused off of meeting those goals. And so that's all something obviously you'd want to have a lawyer pull that agreement together so that you were protected in the event that they still needed to leave. But that's a great way to keep people really motivated and to have skin in the game.
Thank you. That's it for the questions at this
Okay,
moment.
thank you. So how do you find the right franchise for you? And so this really starts with some self-assessment and self-discovery. What are your goals? What are your goals for owning this business? It may be that you're just tired of the corporate rat race and you want to go and do something on your own, be your own boss, be in control of your future. It could be that you want to have an add-on business to your existing business. So just thinking about what your goals are, what kinds of skill and experience and talents can you bring to this business? And then financially, what can you invest? So what can you invest from a cash perspective? Are you going to finance the business, maybe use an SBA loan, or there's another option of 401k rollover that we'll talk about further. But what are you feeling comfortable with? And then what can you commit in terms of time? So what we call the discovery process, which is what we're going to talk about now, it does take time. And it does mean that you're going to meet with either me to get things started and identify the brands, or you're going to be meeting with the franchisor as you start going through their process. So you have to make sure that you've got the time to dedicate. So when I start working with my clients, I have them fill out a profile, and it's got a number of industries that they can select from that they might be interested in. And the other thing it has is a section for high-level financial information, because each franchisor has a minimum target for liquidity, so that's cash on hand, and then for net worth. And so it's always helpful if we have a rough idea of what those numbers are so that we look at franchises that fit. And so when we start talking about specific brands and talk about those industries, we'll go through, what options are available. And so just to throw out the pest control, I think as of right now, we have 4 or 5 different brands that we work with that all offer some type of mosquito tick protection. So we'll talk about what the benefits are of one versus another. What's the demand? What's the demand for that? So to stay with that same industry, Lyme disease is pretty prevalent in Connecticut. I know I've had it. My daughter had it. So it's something that I currently get my lawn sprayed for. So what's the demand for that type of service? And then as we narrow down the industries and then the different brands and pros and cons, then I check for availability. So what is available in your market? So a lot of times it's just zip code based. And so we'll do a search to see what's available in Hartford County as an example. And then typically I get back together again with my clients and we go through all those brands that fit their criteria that are available in their area. So after we go through the brands and we talk about the pros and cons, and you have some time to really digest all of the information. Typically, people have 2 to 3 brands that they're really intrigued by. They like the business model, they like the industry. Sometimes we call it a passion play. It's something they've wanted to do their whole lives. And so at that point, I will introduce them to the franchisor. And then the franchisor starts their process, which begins with just an introductory call. They'll talk about unit economics and then anything about the territory. And then they're going to send you an FDD, a franchise disclosure document. So every franchisor needs to have an FDD, and it needs to be registered in every state that they want to do business with. And it provides really critical details about the business. So in the middle section, here are just some areas that you want to pay close attention to. So the item 7, that is the investment, and it's based off of the prior year's franchisees' experience when they opened one of these businesses. The item 19 is the earnings claims or the financial performance. And again, it's based on last year's results. And it takes many forms. Sometimes you see a profit and loss statement, sometimes you see summary information, but it's really meant to just give you an idea of the potential. And then the item 21, that's the financial statement for the actual franchisor. So you want to just make sure that the franchisor has a healthy financial statement and balance sheet. So when you're going through the FTD, it also will tell you if there's any history of litigation. So that would be a concern. Why are franchisees suing the franchisor? Are a lot of people leaving the system? Are they selling? And what would be the reason for that turnover? And then if you see something that looks too good to be true, then as the saying goes, it probably is. So when we talk about the next step, that's where you can really validate what realistic earnings claims are. So validation, in my humble opinion, is the most important step in this whole process that you go through with a franchisor. And the reason is because it's when you talk to other franchisees that actually own one of these businesses. And there's no better way to understand the benefits, the challenges, what it's like day in and day out to own a business than by talking to someone who does. And if you are thinking of adding on to your current business, or perhaps, having your franchise business be an investment and semi-absentee, you can find out how much time are other owners in that same ownership model spending week after week. So if they say, yeah, it's about 5 hours, I meet with my GM, I look at the books, I, put some ads on Facebook, that might be really doable. But if they tell you it's 25 hours, and they list, all of the different things that they're responsible for, then for a lot of us that have full-time jobs, that would be a non-starter. If you can visit another location, that also is very helpful. When I bought my Budget Blinds franchise, I did what we call ride-alongs. So I rode along with another franchisee just to experience what it was like to do that type of work day in and day out. So the last step after validation is what's called Meet the Team Day. It could also be Discovery Day or Confirmation Day. And it's basically a day-long meeting, usually in person, with the entire senior management team. So everybody from the CEO, marketing, technology, ops, and they'll talk about what the business looks like today. But what I really look for is what's that strategic plan, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, because when you buy a franchise, the agreement is usually for 10 years. So what new products, what new services do they have in the pipeline to keep you ahead of that competition? Whether you decide to sell your business or if you want to renew it at the end of that 10-year agreement, it's still helpful to know what are those strategies. So there are a number of different ways that you can pay for your franchise business, and they include a traditional bank loan. SBA seems to be a very popular model for most people. There's a number of different options based on how much money you need to borrow. The 401k, or it's called ROBS, that's when you roll over into a new 401k, a portion of your old 401k. And the reason people do that is because when you go to sell your business, you are taxed on your initial investment, not on what the new valuation of the business is. So there's some real benefits for using that as a funding option. And then, as I had said earlier, some franchisors will also provide you with funding options. And then important as you're thinking about not only the initial investment and what your loan payment might be, but just going through the plan of the process of creating that business plan is really helpful. So after you go through the process and you've secured your funding, you've gone through discovery day, then the franchisor will call and they'll let you know that they'd like to award you a territory. So franchising is a mutual evaluation process. So as much as you're trying to make sure they're right for you, they're trying to make sure you're right for them. And so they share that they want to award you a territory. And at that point, if you're really excited, this is the one for you, then you sign the agreement and that you're committing to operate and own this franchise. And then you make your initial payment to them, which is usually the franchise fee. But one thing to understand about franchising in this whole process is that you are not under any obligation. So you can go all the way through the process, you can go to discovery day, and then when they come and they say they want to award you it, you can say, thanks, but no thanks. This isn't the right one for me. And so you should never feel high pressure sales. You should never have anybody making you feel obligated because you can go through this process. It's called a discovery process for that very reason without needing to make a commitment until the very end. So then once you've signed your agreement, you head off to training. If you are purchasing a business that requires a brick and mortar type setup, then you would work with the franchisor to find the right location, start that build out, and then starting your marketing. So a lot of times there are things you can do to start spreading the word about your business even prior to it opening. So how to be a successful franchisee, and I would argue these are also tips to be a successful business owner, regardless if you're a franchisee or not. But in the case of franchising, embracing the system. So follow the model. The people that follow the model are the most successful. And when you think about it, that's what you just forked over $49,500 is to get that model. So if you're not going to follow it, then franchising might not be the right option for you. The customer experience. Oftentimes the customer, as I'm sure you know, isn't necessarily upset that there was a glitch in the delivery of their product or service, but it's more about how you handle it and how you make them feel as you're resolving the issue. Managing the books and really having the financial discipline to keep an eye on everything, keep an eye on your sales, on your cost of goods, on any additional expenses, that's just invaluable as you're running your business, especially in the beginning when cash is going to be tighter. Finding and retaining those really great people, as we talked about before with the general manager, making sure that it's a place that people want to work and want to stay. So building a marketing strategy, it's just it's very, very important, because without leads, without people that want you to give them a quote, without that, you don't have a business. So I know in my business, my budget blinds business, believe it or not, and you probably laugh about this, even though it wasn't that long ago, my number one lead source was the Hartford Courant. And so they would run an ad 5 days a week. And if somebody called the number that was on that ad, then I would pay the Hartford Courant $50. So that was my number one lead source for a long time. And then the Yellow Pages, and I know that probably is not even, I don't think anybody publishes a phone book anymore. But one year when we wanted to hit the $1 million mark, we actually came up with our marketing strategy. We ran promotions month after month. And then every month we'd have a team meeting and we'd talk about our results. So how many leads did we get? How many sales did we make? How many appointments do we need to get that kind of revenue? And we made that, that year we hit our $1 million, actually $1.2 million mark, and then we celebrated. So staying committed to continuous learning, whether you're a franchise or not, is just so important. What new technologies can you embrace? What new products are out there to help support your business? Having a really good relationship with your franchisor will help you as you grow and evolve and eventually, want to sell your business and retire. So sometimes people can view the franchisor almost as an adversary. I mean, it can be just adversarial. They can view them as sort of like the enemy, where the franchisor is there to help you be successful. And sometimes you might not like some of the things that they say, but it is a partnership, and having that good working relationship is really important. And then have that growth mindset, set those goals. And when you meet them, celebrate. So now you may be saying, after listening to me for almost an hour here, I really think that I could franchise my business. I've got multiple locations. I'm a profitable, successful business. And so there are people in our industry that will help you do just that. So it starts with just understanding the viability of making it a franchise. And so if you can check off those boxes, that it's profitable, that you've been able to scale it, and that it's got some unique quality, then it certainly could be a good candidate for a franchise. Is the demand for your product or service something that would be nationwide, or is it really just more of a geographical kind of niche market? So as I said earlier, every franchisor has to have an FTD. There are laws that each state has in addition to whatever regulations are stated in the FDD. So when you get an FDD, you'll see the last 75 pages are all state specific. So having someone that can help you build your FDD and then understand what kind of requirements are going to be needed in all of the different states that you want to do business in. So if it's something you really feel like you want to do, and I actually through SCORE talked to another mentor that had a client that wants to franchise her business. So it is something that we can point you in the right direction. And so that is the end of our presentation. I hope that it was enlightening and gave you some additional insights to franchising. So now we can just open it up to any additional questions.
Hey, Ruth, while
Thanks.
we do the Q&A, do you want to put your contact info up on the next slide just so people can see it?
Oh, sure.
And I know you've got this the tools you wanted to share too. So go ahead, Kathleen.
Great. Thank you, Ruth. And a reminder to everyone, if you want to ask a question, please type it in the Q&A box. We have one right now from Chris. It's a long one, so I'll kind of break it into pieces. When evaluating a franchise opportunity, what are the regulations and common practices regarding access to franchisee financial performance data? Specifically, are franchisors permitted to share profit and loss statements from existing franchisees, or perhaps provide representative samples or estimates? That's part one.
So in the FDD, in the item 19, some franchisors do provide copies of profit and loss statements. Others will provide summary information, so they'll roll up and say it's based off of years in business. They may give you information, so summary information from that perspective. It could be top quartile, average, bottom quartile. So the real place that you want to get financial information when looking at a franchise is during that validation phase. And so other franchisees, they can share with you what their gross revenues are, what their expenses are, what the net income is. And I find that they're usually very willing to do so because not too long ago, their feet were in your shoes and they were trying to find out this same information and see if this was the right business for them. The other thing that just to understand about the financial performance and a criteria, so the franchisor cannot put financial information in the FDD unless the franchisee has been in business for 12 months and it needs to be a calendar. Oops, sorry. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, well, that's okay. It has to be a calendar month. So, I mean, 12 months in a calendar year. And so if they haven't been in business, let's say they bought their business in April, well, you wouldn't see their performance until the following year because it has to be a 12-month from a calendar perspective. So that's just something else that is, I think, useful to understand about franchising.
So just to clarify, because the second part of his question was, what's the process for a potential franchisee to obtain this information? So just to clarify, you're saying the franchisor in the FDD has to include some type of financial information. How specific it is varies from franchise to franchise?
It actually, they can determine whether or not they put financial performance information in the FDD. So they can choose to exclude it. And sometimes it's because they are a newer brand and they don't have anything that they can put in. So if it's brand that doesn't have a franchise that's been in business for the full calendar year, there's nothing to put in. But what typically happens is when you start talking to the franchisor, they will share with you the financial performance of what we call their company-owned stores or company-owned outlets. So if you remember back to the beginning, we talked about how they get started in franchising. They usually open up, several locations. They'll share that financial performance with you. They'll let you know what it would look like if it was a franchise, because they'll take out the royalties and the marketing funds. So, so they will give you that information if they can't provide it yet in the FDD. And then, as I said, the best way to get financial performance information is talk to those people that own the businesses and talk to as many as you can, because that's where you really get to understand, what's it look like in a semi-absentee model in terms of profitability versus owner operator.
And that's not required, but most of them will generously offer to
Yeah.
let you do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks on behalf of Chris.
Okay.
Next question, also from Chris. When evaluating franchises, are there any red flags to specifically look out for?
Yes, I would look out for litigation. I would look for high turnover. So, lots of franchisees selling their businesses or leaving their businesses, that you'd want to understand why. And then, I think it's really also a red flag in terms of how they handle the process and how they work with you. So it should be a collaborative, educational process when you're looking at a franchise. And if you start to feel that it's not, then that to me would be a red flag as well.
Okay, so litigation, turnover, and lack of collaboration are the three
Those would be
big ones.
those would be the top three. And as it said on one of the slides as well, if they're putting in writing, earnings claims that just seem too good to be true, that's where you need to validate by talking to other franchisees. Is this what they're seeing? Are they experiencing the same type of results that the franchisor is saying?
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, that's
No
great.
further questions.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up in a minute here. I did want to launch a quick poll. This is just asking everybody who is still able to stay on for a minute or two, asking if you are interested in working with a SCORE mentor. If you are, just please let us know in the questions here, and you'll get an email from me later today telling you how to do that. Don't worry, that's the only email you'll get. I will not bombard you. It's strictly a free mentoring offer that we offer all of our small business owners. So if you're interested in doing that, please answer that poll, and you'll hear all about it. Ruth, I want to thank you very much for presenting this today. A wonderful topic and very informative for everybody who's looking to get into this type of business. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And just as a reminder for everybody, you'll get a copy of this. You'll get a copy of Ruth's presentation as well as a link to the recording in your email tomorrow. And you can find all of our webinars on our YouTube channel. Just search for SCORE Greater Hartford. And while you are there, please subscribe to the channel. Then every time a new webinar is added, you'll get a notification. So we'll go ahead and end the poll. Kathleen, go ahead.
One more question.
Oh, we got one more question. All right, I'm glad I didn't stop. Go ahead.
From Lisa, when considering a franchise, will the franchisor provide a market analysis report so you can determine if it will work in your region?
Yes, yes, they will work with you on doing that market analysis, because sometimes when I'm researching brands for people in specific locations, they will come back to me and say it's not viable in this specific location. There isn't enough population, or it's not densely populated, or the average household income doesn't meet our criteria. So yes, you will go through that. Both if you use a coach, you know, they will have insights as to that, as well as the franchisor.
All
Thank
right,
you.
great. And Ruth, I know there were a couple things on your last slide. There were a couple tools that you or links that you wanted. I don't know if you're unable to share again, that's fine. But if you want to just mention it, because it'll be in the presentation, people get a copy of.
Yeah, I
So
was going to suggest that anyway, because you can't really see the links. It's a clickable link, and so
Right,
it's probably better off if people just click on that when they get the email.
right.
oh, okay, let me just do this again.
So if you look at nothing else besides in this presentation, make sure you at least go to the back and click on the links if you want to get involved at all, or want to evaluate whether getting involved is something that you're interested in.
Right. There's that information there. So you'll get a copy of the presentation. You can click on those links, and you've got Ruth's contact information as
Yeah,
well.
so you know, if you click on the assessment, it'll just ask you to click here, and it only takes about 10 minutes, but it's kind of interesting. You know, people always are amazed at what they learn about themselves through the assessment. And then the network profile, the personal profile, that just kind of gives you an idea of the industries and just the type of information and the questions that would be asked through something like that. So.
All right, wonderful. Ruth, thanks again. Kathleen, I think we're good on Q&A, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right,
Yes.
wonderful. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Again, if you want to find out more about us, you can go to score.org, and you can find our YouTube channel by searching for Score Greater Hartford. Take care, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.